Good morning, folks. I wanted to put out a video to kind of give you a really basic refresher about verbs. And I also wanted to kind of explain why I'm doing things a very specific way when I break things down into clauses and phrases. The reason why we're doing that is that we want to break the poem down into logical units so that we can find out what those logical units are functioning as. What is the subject? What is the subject doing? And what is he doing it to? And where is he doing it? And so on and so forth. And the easiest way to do that is to find the main verbs first, because as you already know, every clause must have both a verb and a subject. It must. If it only has one or the other or neither, then it's what they call a phrase. Clauses, like I said, be dependent or independent in their meaning. And dependent clauses are basically there to add meaning to the independent clause. Okay. And every sentence, as you know, must have at least one independent clause. I think everybody probably understands that by now. But I wanted to explain a little bit more so that you understand when I get to the part after I do the verbs and then I locate the subjects, there's a logic behind that. And there's certain things that I know, and I want to relay those to you now. And remember, too, if you were in first grade, they're not going to get into deep things. They're going to start out with simple sentences like Jimmy hit the ball. They're not going to start getting into complements and indirect objects and stative verbs. Okay. The teacher, when they first tell you in first grade that a verb is an action word, right? That's most teachers are going to tell you, but that's not true. Some verbs are what they call state of being or stative or linking verbs, right? Those are not telling you an act. It's not telling somebody to do an action. They're telling you a state of being. Christine is pretty. Is in that case is a linking being used as a linking verb. All right. And it's telling you the state of Christine. It's just saying that she is pretty, right? Some verbs, it's important to realize that they can work as both stated or an action. Okay. And the way you determine that is how they're being used in the sentence. And you have to do that first. So there's rules that govern that. And I'm trying to point those out to you as we go along through the analysis of the poem. And the other thing you got to understand is that some verbs are going to work as transitive or intransitive. Some verbs are always intransitive. Some verbs might be the opposite. Some verbs can play either role. And again, it depends on the context. Now, transitive means that it requires an object. It must. It's not an option. It must. So, like if I said, Jimmy hit the ball, in that case, hit is being used as a transitive verb. So it must have an object. And an object must be a noun or a pronoun. It gets a little bit tricky later, and like I said, as you go through grades in elementary school, they make things more and more complicated because you'll end up running into things such as two infinitives, two plus infinitive, or gerunds, which is gerund is a gerund, right? And basically, a gerund sounds fancy, but all it is a verb with ing added to it. Okay. And when you have a gerund in the predicate, now the predicate is everything from the verb, the main verb, onto the rest of the sentence. If you have a stative verb, right? For example, is, in my example before, Christine is pretty, right? That verb has to, just like transitive verbs would need a direct object, when you have a stative or a state of being verb or a linking verb, it must be followed by what they call a complement. Okay. And the complement is going to be functioning sort of like an adjective. Okay. So, like a gerund would come into that play, even though it's a noun, it's what they would call a predicate nominative. Nominative is just a big word that means noun or noun phrase, right? So, if you have the word swimming, for example, right, which is a gerund in this case, he's not telling somebody to swim, it's defining swimming. If I said Troy is swimming, right? Is the main verb. Swimming is just telling you what state I'm in. I am swimming. It's not the main verb. But when it's in the sentence like that, in the predicate like that, you can modify it verbs with adverbs, right? because that's what it's acting as. But in reality, it's really acting as a predicate nominative, which is complementing the subject. It's adding more information to the subject. The way you can tell if a verb is being used as a linking verb or not is to replace it with an equal sign. For example, Christine is pretty. I could say Christine equals pretty, and the sentence still makes sense. So I know that is being used as a linking verb. And that means that I can expect either a predicate nominative or an adjective. Only those two things could work as a subject complement. Okay. And they're telling me more information about Christine, obviously. Right. Now, the other thing is, like I said, as time goes on, you're going to learn that there's verbs are not just actions. Like, actions are not just run, walk, eat, so on and so forth, right? You also have the state and linking verbs. I just described those to you. Here are some example linking verbs, okay? These are not all of them. It's not an exhaustive list. Be, is, am, was, were, been, look. Now, you're going to notice that some of these are going to have dual roles because we also have something called a helping or auxiliary verb. And that verb is working to help the main verb add tense or moon or what they call voice. So those are am, is, are, were, that again is not an exhaustive list, right? So you also have modal verbs. And a modal verb is helping the main verb describe the ability or the possibility or permission or intention, obligation, and necessity. Some of those are can, could, may, might, must, right? Ought to, shall, should, will, would. And as you can see, Forrest Fenn uses some of those. Okay, like, I can keep. Okay, I can keep. So you got two verbs. So in that case, can is acting as a modal verb, and it's expressing the fact that you have the possibility or permission, intention, or necessity or obligation to do whatever follows that. So, Forrest Frank could have said, I keep my secret where, but he said, I can keep my secret where, because he's saying that he's expressing his ability, possibility, permission, or intention. And that becomes important when you're analyzing that sentence, because what he's really telling you is that the clause before it that says, as I have gone alone in there and with my treasures bulb, I can keep it secret where. So what's causing him, or what's giving him the ability to do that, is that clause right before it. Okay, that's why he didn't say can. So he really is trying to direct you that the clause is important, where he's saying as he's describing what he did. Okay, and he's saying what he did it with. Okay, I did it with my treasured bulb. So the act of going alone in there and with the treasured bulb are what allowed him to do two things. I can keep my secret where, and I can hint of riches new and old. So that's why he has can there. If he just wanted to state the fact that he has a secret somewhere, okay, he would just say, I keep it. I keep my secret there. He wouldn't need to use a modal verb to express the possibility or ability or permission or intention or obligation or necessity of doing it. So it's important that you understand all of that. And I hope that this gives you an idea of how I'm finding indirect objects and how I'm determining whether it's an action or a linking verb, right? And the way I'm doing it, like I said, is that how it's being used. And I know that if it's transitive, it's going to need an indirect object. Clearly, if it's being used transitively, that means that it's not going to be followed by a subject complement. It will be followed by a noun or a pronoun, or a phrase or a clause that's working as a noun or a pronoun. So I can make that assumption. If it's intransitive, it means that it doesn't have an object with it, right? Its meaning is complete without having an object. And again, you got to remember that some verbs can be either transitive or intransitive. It depends on how their being is. Now, an indirect object is going to tell you who or what is the recipient of an action. For example, Jimmy hit the ball, right? That's giving you Jimmy is the subject, hit is the verb, and the ball is an object. If I wanted to add an indirect object, I could do it two different ways. I could say Jimmy hit the ball to Troy. I could say Jimmy hit Troy the ball, and then when that either way, then that would be acting as an indirect object. And I know just So I'm learning that indirect objects can never appear unless there's a direct object there. So if I don't find a direct object, I'm not going to look for indirect objects. And then there's other rules too, that a prepositional phrase. So if a prepositional phrase follows a state of being or a linking verb, I know for sure that a prepositional phrase cannot operate as a noun. And I know that a direct object has to be a noun or a pronoun. But then I also know that in that case is likely working as a state of being or a linking verb, right? So if there's a prepositional phrase after it, prepositional phrases can only function as adjectives or adverbs. So a whole entire prepositional phrase could be describing the state of the subject. Okay. That's how all of that stuff works when you're breaking it down. So let's go over an example sentence just to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so this sentence here a little bit more difficult because I want to prove a couple of points in here. So let's do what we would normally do. Okay, we're going to go and we're going to find the main verb in this. The main verb that we have is. Now, some people are going to look at this and say, "But Troy, what about dancing?" All right, so let's underline it for right now. Right? It's not the main verb. Okay, so now let's find the subject in here. All right, so who is crazy? Who or what? This is being used as a state of being verb, right? Clearly, because it has an adjective after it, crazy. So we know crazy, an adjective, let me underline it, is going to be functioning as a subject complement. But what's the subject here? Street? No, street's not the subject. It's actually, in the street is actually a prepositional phrase, and this is working as the object of the preposition. And like I said, these could never work as nouns. So it can't be a noun or a pronoun. It's definitely not the subject. And we know we're not talking about Street, the YouTuber. Yeah, he's crazy, but we're not talking about him, right? So is it dancing? Dancing is crazy? No, the lady is crazy. Okay. So here we have a big disconnect between them because it's telling you more information about the lady. And you can test this theory by replacing is with equal and ignore all of this stuff for now, okay? The lady equals crazy, right? It makes sense. The lady equals crazy. You would then say, well, what lady are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the lady dancing in the street. This, so in the street is a prepositional phrase, like I just said. Well, this is a gerund, Gerund. It is a verb, like I said, but it's acting as a noun. It's not working as a verb in this particular clause. So this in the street is actually modifying dancing. Where are they dancing? In the street. Okay. So we got that done, and we know that the lady is actually the main subject in this sentence. Okay. And you know that the is the determiner. So which lady? Well, it's telling you the specific lady, right? So the is a determiner and it's modifying lady. Okay. And crazy is working as a subject complement following the linking verb is, and it's telling us more information about the lady. It's saying the lady is crazy. Okay. Now, when you have a phrase like this in the middle, it can be defining or undefining. Like it's not important, in other words. If it's a defining phrase, in other words, it's telling us like important information to help define. In this case, it's working as an adjective, right? Pretty clear. And it's modifying the noun. So it's got to be an adjective. Which lady? Well, the lady that's dancing in the street. So we know it's functioning as an adjective. If this didn't matter, and I was just adding it there for fluff, like to make my writing more interesting, I would have to put a comma before and I would have to put a comma after it. And that would make this optional, where you could say the lady is crazy. But because of the fact that there's no commas here, okay, let me get rid of them, it means that it's defining. In other words, it's important. There might be more than one lady in the street. And here I'm clarifying the one that is dancing in the street, right? Now, that's basically why I go for the verbs first, because it helps make it easy. So now I can look at this and I know that this whole thing is operating as an independent clause. Okay, so we have a good sentence. It's got a main verb, it's got a main subject, okay, and it's got modifiers in it. But I broke it down. I know where the phrase is. I know that this is not a clause. It can't be because it doesn't have a subject, right? And we know that this is street is working as a noun because it's got the determiner the before it, and it's the object of a preposition. So we basically figured everything out, and we figured out what part of speech each one of those things is working as. Like I said, we know that this as a group is functioning as an adjective. Okay, so this is not a verb. You know, now somebody might look at it and say, "Well, the dancing is a verb." It's not. No, it's not. It's a gerund in this case. It is a verb technically, but it's functioning as a noun. Okay, and in this case, it's working as an adjective because it's helping define which lady it is. So that's why you break sentences down. If when you first seen that sentence before we did this, you might have some confusion because if you're reading it quickly, what is the subject? And you can say, well, street is a noun, so street is crazy. And that's true. The YouTuber street is crazy. But street is not subject here. So you go back to that. Could that be the subject? No, it's a determiner. In, no, it's a preposition. Dancing, okay, maybe if you understand gerunds, but it's clearly the lady. All right. Now, those of you who've been watching my grammar stuff for a long time know that in the beginning I did what they call sentence diagramming, and I probably shouldn't have done that because I really didn't understand the diagramming itself, but I kind of do now, right? So I'm going to show you how it makes things easy when you diagram stuff. Okay, so I'm going to do it with this sentence here. I'm going to diagram it. What you have is a baseline. And what you put on that baseline is a dividing line. Okay, now notice how that line extends, goes all the way through the baseline. So when you're looking at this, okay, this is where you put the subject, and this is what you put the verb, right? So I would basically put is over here, and the main noun is lady. So I'm going to put lady over on the subject. At a glance, you can tell what's the subject, lady. What's the main verb is. Makes it easier to see this so you can see how all the words are functioning, right? Then underneath the subject or underneath your nouns, you could have adjectives. Now, and the adjectives are the determiners, of course, are describing that, right? So the way they go on there is you basically take a slanted line and you put it underneath there, and then you would put, for example, the determiner, the. Now you would write the on an angle. I can't do that in Paint, so I'm going to just put it like this. But you would write the determiner, and you would keep it capitalized too, so that when you look at the diagram, you could see what the first word was. But this should be written on the slant, and then you're on the slanted line, and you would write it in the same direction that the slant's going. So which lady? The lady, right? So any other adjectives that are defining her would also go under there. As a matter of fact, speaking of that, let me move this to the left because I'm going to run out of room here. So we have the done, we have lady done, and we have is done. We got some other words to put there now, right? So crazy. Let's put crazy there. We know that crazy is working as a subject complement. And the way you would do that is right after the verb, you would put a line that slants back pointing towards the subject. If that were instead a direct object, then this line would go straight up and down. You put the direct object over here. But since we know that it's working as a complement, you use the slanted line, okay, and you would put crazy there. And you could kind of think of that as this is almost like an arrow pointing back to the subject. So the main gist of this sentence is lady is crazy. The lady is crazy. That's the main gist of the sentence. So now we also have that word done. Crazy is done, right? So then we got dancing, okay? And she's got dancing. That's going to appear as, so basically you would do the same thing with dancing, okay? You would write it down here on this line. It's a noun. You'll notice that the nouns are always on the flat part of the line when you come down like that. Anything that's on a slant written at an angle is going to be an adverb or an adjective, depending on what's above it. Clearly, here this is an adjective or determiner because above it, we're always going to have a noun and a pronoun. If it was over here, it would be an adverb because it's modifying the verb. Okay, that's basically how that works. So, what about in the street? Well, that would be like this. The way you would diagram a prepositional phrase is underneath, and here we know it's modifying a noun. We know it's working as a adjective. So you would put the same thing. It's on a slanted line, right? So the way you do these is you put the preposition on an angle going down. So what we would do is we would have it in would be written on this line, but you would write it diagonally. And then on the flat part, you will put the object of the preposition, which is, of course, street. So street would go here. And can you guess where the would go? Yeah. The would go down here. Of course, it'll be written on an angle again because that's how we do determiners and adjectives, right? So we're providing more information about the lady dancing in the street, okay, is crazy, right? But this, I'm going to tell you, is actually wrong. And you're going to say, but Troy, you just told me all of that stuff. What I told you was precise. But if you're diagramming, you have to really break it down and really understand. And the fact of the matter is, when I told you that the lady is the subject, I was lying to you. Okay, sort of. I wasn't telling you all the truth because maybe you don't need to know that, but the actual subject is all of that. That's the subject. Who is crazy? The lady dancing in the street. So the whole entire noun, and you could call it a clause because it's got a subject and a verb, dancing, right? Now, I know that I told you dancing is functioning as a noun, but within the clause, within its own little box, it's working as a verb. It's not functioning as a verb when it's out impacting the sentence that it's impact because this part of the sentence over here is not tied to that. They're their own individual units, right? So the proper way to document that would be to put that, okay, instead of having a lady, what they do is they would take a pedestal and they would put the pedestal on the side where the subject goes. And I'm not going to do it now, but all of the stuff that's down here would not be here. It would be up here. And this pedestal would actually say it would have lady and it would have this line again, right? So it would have that vertical line coming all the way through it, and it would have lady and it would have the underneath here. But this time, instead of putting is there, it would have the verb dancing. In the street would be functioning as an adverb modifying dancing. So this would have over here, lady, because lady is the subject, okay? And then it would have dancing over here, right? And then underneath here on an angle, it would say in, and then it would say street, and then the under street, just like I did down here. So you wouldn't see all of this stuff down here. It wouldn't be here. It would be up there. And I'm not going to move the prepositional phrase, but you understand what I'm talking about, right? So in the street would be down here. In street and then the underneath of it. So now the whole sentence is the whole noun, this whole clause is functioning as a noun and it is the subject of the sentence, okay, the main sentence. That's how diagramming comes into play, and it makes things easier for you to visualize what's going on. That's why I documented before. It's kind of cool. And in Forrest's day, doing sentence diagramming was very popular. Matter of fact, it was popular up until about sometime in the mid 60s. And for some reason, they stopped doing that, right? So now they use trees. You can see trees, they'll break it down as the root, the main verb root, and then they would come down and they would have this subject. and it's all drawing it down in the tree. To me, that's harder to visualize than it is here. This is pretty cool. Now, I made a lot of mistakes in those videos, not in my determination as to what everything is functioning as, but these symbols and I wasn't doing things like I was doing the baseline properly with noun, verb, and then backslash for the complements and using it up straight up and down if this was an object, and then and all of that stuff's being done right. But I was trying to do two things at once: learn the grammar and then also do the learn the diagramming, and it was probably a stupid mistake. But the reason why I did it is because I'm convinced that they should have never got rid of this in school. I think that this is really cool to let you look at a glance. Okay. So my idea behind this was that I was going to do that for every sentence in the poem and then string them in one document so that you could look and draw lines around and how everything is interacting with everything, right? It'd be really useful. And that's why I did the sentence diagram. And I'm not going to do that again because I don't want to invest the time at this point. I figured it's just much more easier for me to go through and do this kind of stuff up here and show it to you like that. So these here I was going to use them as labels. Like, for example, predicate adjective, predicate noun, direct object, indirect object. That's what I'm going to do in the future. I'm going to put these little identifiers above this. I'll put like S for subject, VB for the main verb, and this way you'll be able to see it at a glance. And the other thing I think I'm going to do, we're halfway done through the poem. We did stanzas 1, 2, and 3 with a deep dive. So I need to do 4, 5, and 6. And I'm going to do those a little bit differently to speed things up. I'm not going to sit there and do what I just did now and draw lines about everything. I'm going to do that ahead of time. So the first shot that you see of the stanza is going to already have it broken down. So the only thing I'm going to do in the video is explain to you the choices that I made, why I made them, and what everything means. That'll speed it along because at this time and point, since we've been halfway through the video, those of you that actually have an interest in following this, you already know the process. I don't need to waste time in the video underlining prepositional phrases and main verbs and other components that are in here. You should know them by then, and you're going to certainly know them after I explain them. So there's no point in me making it drag on by showing you how I drew everything. Okay. The only thing I'm probably not going to do ahead of time is circle the main objects whenever I have something to indicate to you that this is functioning as a clause that's doing this. I want to make sure that it's very clear, and I want to do that interactively. But labeling the words, I don't have to do that interactively. I think that you guys are going to understand it by now. So that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I want to make one more comment. And this is to Bear or anybody else that wants to leave a message. I still like that guy, Bear. I think he's a pretty cool guy, but I got annoyed with him because I'm doing all of this work, all this grammar work, right? It takes a ton of effort and a ton of time. And I took the effort essentially to break the whole poem down, every single word, every line. Outside of the solve, I'm not talking about solves here, so get that out of your mind. All I'm trying to do is tell you to read the poem the way Forrest Fenn wrote it. And I spent a ton of time doing this, right? So I did all that work. And I'm not telling you that I'm Mr. Perfect and I didn't make a mistake. So he wanted to kind of do like a video where basically I guess he would interview me or something, and somehow he was going to go over my analysis. I don't want to do it that way, okay? I don't want to waste my time because I've already described to you in my video why I made these choices. I don't need to use a third party to have them do my work, especially if that third party actually has less viewers than I do. I mean, I'm not no Cal Lazares. I don't have, thousands of subscribers, but I do have over 800. I had almost 1,000 at one point, and I do have 250,000 views, just about, right? So I'm no slouch. I get like 4,000 views a month. I don't need a third party to use as a platform to express my views. I've already expressed my views in my videos. And what I said to Bear is, if you want me to do it, I'll do it. But here's the deal. Number one, I don't want to have the Nookers, and he knew what I meant. I will not, absolutely will not do any videos with Capro and Cal and Cynthia or anybody, Rudy, anybody that's on there. I want no association with them. I'm not going to discuss anything with them one to one. I'm not going to do anything. But there is an exception to all of that, and I told and I told Bear that exception it applies to him too. Instead of me going and explaining everything that I did, because it's already in my videos, it makes no sense. I don't have time to waste doing that. I'm already going through all this effort. If you want to know, why I made my choices, watch my videos. But here's what I will do. You go, okay, Bear, you or Bear, Cal, any of you guys, do exactly what I did. And don't do it with a sob. I'm not telling you to prove your sob in Yellowstone. All I'm telling you is I want you to break the poem down into logical units and tell me how they're grammatically functioning and how the poem works. That's all I want you to tell me. If you do that in detail, like I am, literally go over every single word in the poem and every clause, break it down to clauses, phrases, show us how everything is interacting, okay, and show us how the poem is functioning. In other words, like I told you, there is no way, period, that the poem is telling you to go down in the canyon with the water. It just doesn't work that way. That's a fact. I'm not going to debate it anymore. My time is too valuable. If you don't understand that that's the way it works, go learn grammar. Okay. But here's the important part behind that. If you really do believe that, I want you to show me how that's working grammatically. And I'm not just going to accept bullshit like, oh, there's a poetic license, because that's not the way it works. Forrest Fenn put punctuation in the poem, and we need to use the punctuation because he put it there. You can't just say, poetic license would be if you left all the punctuation out. That's poetic license. And poetic license is the fact that he uses slant rhyme on two of the lines in the poem. That's poetic license. But he wasn't writing a poem like a beautiful poem that we would read. He was writing a poem that had dual purposes. It one, look good. Number two, it needed to be precise instructions to a treasure chest. And he wrote it in English. So he's going to assume that somebody with a basic understanding of how English works is going to be able to read it. And they have to be able to get information out of it. And he said there's no subterfuge. So that's why he added the punctuation. That's why he was more precise. That's why it took him so long, because he couldn't write a poem that was ambiguous to its meaning, because then he can't expect an average person with intelligence to solve it, right? He can expect the fact that somebody doesn't want to put the effort to properly read it is not going to be able to solve it. And that's tough shit, because you're not doing what he told you to do. Analyze a poem and study it and then follow it with precision to the treasure chest. You're trying to avoid it. And instead of doing the work, you're coming up with silly excuses such as poetic license. And like I said, if you believe that something is poetic license, you could do that. But I'm not going to, I'm not, when somebody tells me that they don't, he literally told me, I don't have the time to do something like that. So if you read that, what he's saying is he's being condescending to me. He's saying, you do all that work. I don't have the time for that. Even though I only have like 100 subscribers and 4,000 views or something like that. Well, you do all the work. I'm Mr. Big Shot here. I'm just going to sit here and critique your work, right? Because I don't have the guts to go and give my grammatical background to the poem. And I'm not going to deal with that anymore. When people pull that crap on my channel, you're gone. I mean, I have no time for it at this point. If it were 4 years ago, yeah, I would allow it, because the chase ain't over, right? But then again, I wouldn't be getting this detailed. I'm not going to get this detailed. I want to help people, but I wouldn't give out the sob if the damn chest was still out there like this. I wouldn't go through this kind of detail. So if you want to go through the effort and spend the thousands of hours that I did to verify and cross-reference with English experts, everything that you say before you put your videos out there, make sure that you check it, that it's grammatically correct. And believe me, they'll tell you whether or not poetic license is being used. Because I can tell you right now that the poem is grammatically correct all the way through, except for the very first line. And I indicate that. And I indicate what the results are of that determination Okay. But for the most part, everything else in the poem is grammatically correct. So if you're going to read it some way other than the way that I'm reading it, you're distorting the poem. So I have no problem with you writing up your description of the entire poem. And then we can go and compare your description and mine side by side. Okay. And then we can debate it and bounce. That's the kind of thing I wouldn't mind doing. I would go on anybody's show to do that. But I'm not going to go on anybody's show to do it unless they put forth the same effort that I did, or they're going to pay me a large amount of money for my time, because I'm essentially going to go on their show to repeat myself that I've already made countless hours of videos over the past years to fully explain everything. Why should I have to go on another show and repeat that? Watch my videos and you'll learn it. The only reason to go on a show would be to compare or debate mine versus yours. So you better be prepared and you better know what you're talking about, dog. You got to be able to back up what you say, okay? And I am doing just that here. So if you come out and say, like for example, paddle in the poem is being used as a verb, I proved why it's not a verb. Okay. So if you thought that it was a verb, you better prove it. Okay. And then if we have to, we'll go to a grammar expert and they can listen to my explanation and listen to yours and determine who's correct. Are you up for that? Instead of talking a bunch of bullshit, because talk is cheap, man. Let me see you actually walk the walk. Okay. Prove to me. And like I said, I'm no God. I mean, I might have made a mistake. If you could prove to me that I made a mistake with logic and you show me how I made it, that's a good thing. I would admit that I'm wrong because I would say, holy crap, that caused me to miss something and it messed up my solve. I would love to do that. But unfortunately, nobody wants to do that. Everybody's afraid of the poem. They have no problem coming like a nutcase over to my videos or whatever and saying I'm wrong and grammar don't matter. But then they never give out their own solve. Okay. Or if they do their own solve, they never refer to the poem and they never break it down word for word and phrase for phrase and clause for clause. You'll always hear them. Well, this is where my one word salt and they'll usually add a couple of references outside of the poem because they'll say Forrest Fenn took a shit in the woods that day and when he was fishing. So this is where that's the home of Brown, and this is where he loved to fish as a kid. Forget about the fact that he fished in thousands of places. What makes that space so special? And then they'll go till they're blue in the face. They'll be like, because in the scrapbook here, and they'll start going crazy with all these references. And they're completely ignoring my point. My point is that you have to be able to explain it with just the solve. And I'm willing to debate anybody that is also willing to do that because I did it. I did the work. Okay. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is if you didn't do the work, then you're in no position to challenge me. I'm in the driving seat here. Okay. If you want to challenge me, then you got to show me why. That's the way it works. That's the way it works in real life. Okay. And if you're going to be going down the canyon and argue that point, that waters is not the subject for halt to take, I don't even want to talk to you because you're trying to tell me that you know how to read in one breath. And then you're giving me an example that you don't know how to read because you're not reading it correctly. And I think that that's part of the problem here in the chase. People get offended when they realize that they don't really understand how to read properly. And like I said, in 99% of the cases, it's never going to matter. You could look at the sentence and kind of understand what it means, but it does matter in the poem because he's taken very, very advantage of that you understand every single thing as far as the meanings go. Let me give you an example. Let's talk about two prepositions, under and below. Okay. Why did Forrest use below and not under the home of Brown? Well, just without getting into heavy details, if you look up those two determiners, under is going to have is going to be closer, and it's also going to be directly under. Okay, it has a specific meaning. If I say under the sink, it's literally under the sink. If you go under the sink, it's literally going to be either touching the bottom of the sink or on the verse shelf that's closest to the sink. So you use under when you're talking about close distances. Okay, When you say below, okay, you're going to be talking about further distances. If I were in the Trump Towers, okay, and let's say Trump is up on the top floor and I had an office in that building, I could say I'm below him but I'm not being precise. I'm somewhere on one of the floors below him. But if I say under, that would mean that I'm directly under him. If he's on the 50th floor or whatever, I'm on the 49th. Okay. And technically, it also means under within the bounds of. So I would literally be under, like, if he only had one office on that top floor, not only am I on the floor beneath him, but I'm directly under his office. And Forrest took advantage of stuff like that. When he's telling you to do things or go places, he's assuming that you're going to look these things up and understand precisely what he's talking about because he can be precise. But most people aren't going to look something like that up. They're just going to think, well, below, I know what it means. Well, you don't. And I'll give you another example. Below the Homer Brown, right, means that I'm somewhere below an elevation. It's really clear, okay? Really clear. Now, under the Homer Brown would essentially literally mean I burrowed into the mountain and I'm physically under the Homer Brown if the Homer Brown was on the mountain. I'm literally under it, directly under it and directly below it. But if I said I'm below it, I'm just at a lower elevation. I'm not in a tunnel below it, okay? Because then I would be under it. But he's not telling people to dig into the mountain. So it's little things like that kind of matter, you know? And you're going to see that after we're done with this grammar analysis and we go over the whole poem. So anyway, I hope this gives you a little bit more insight as to why I always begin with the verbs and why I'm breaking it down like this. And I hope it also helps you with determining when we have a complement or do we have a direct object. There's only one indirect object in the entire poem, and that's on the very last line. He's saying, I give you, you're the indirect object there. I give you, what is he giving you? The title. Title to what? To the goal, is prepositional phrase. So that's the only time I think, sometime in my head, that he's using an indirect object. But either way, you now know what an indirect object is, what an object is, how complements work, what subjects are, and what verbs are. That's all you really need to understand, basic stuff here. But you need to be able to look at that verb and say, is it the main verb or is this the main verb? And you need to be able to explain why is the main verb and not dancing. You need to be able to explain that. Because somebody's going to go to you and say, well, dancing's a verb and lady is a subject, right? Lady dancing. Why are you saying this is the main verb? And I just explained to you why. Until you're able to do that, then you're not in any position to debate with me or to go over things. Because I would love, but believe me, I would love it. I would love to have somebody do what I did so that I could watch their videos and maybe I see something that I missed, or we can bounce ideas off each other. But why should I waste my time with somebody that's essentially telling me that they don't want to waste their time doing what I'm asking to do, but I should waste my time to go on their show to explain everything that I've already explained. And then they're obviously going to debate me and question me, which is fine, but they haven't done any work. How are they going to debate me on any level if they haven't already done their work? It doesn't make any sense. It's like bringing somebody on the show to interview and you never read any of their books. You would look like an idiot. I mean, but people go on shows like that in order to promote something. I'm not trying to promote anything here. I'm trying to help people, right? If you're trying to build your channel by bringing content creators such as myself in, then you got to bring yourself up to my level before it's even worth me considering, because if you're going to be condescending, then I'm going to be condescending, right? Except, like I said, I'm in the driver's seat. I did the work. Okay? I'm helping people. I'm not just sitting there blowing steam out of my ass. I'm doing the do. I'm walking the walk. I don't just go and create 15 Zoom channels that look like Hollywood squares and sit there like a bunch of boneheads. So if you don't want to get involved in the grammar, that's fine too. Then go watch a show like that. You're not going to learn anything. You're just going to be looking at a bunch of people that are playing Hollywood squares that don't know what they're talking about. They're planting stuff and fake logs in the woods. They're doing all kinds of things to try to make money. And by the way, Netflix just laid off a bunch of people. They're not doing too good. I think they're going to go bankrupt. And it's not because of the chase, because they're a leftist organization with a bunch of propaganda. So, but anyway, I don't think they're going to be doing a documentary anytime soon. I also think that it would just help bankrupt them quicker if they were to use morons such as people trying to claim that one log and all of Yellowstone and all of Wyoming, that one log, there's none that are even similar to it. So, and the poem, what do you mean the poem? I'm not going to do anything with the poem. That's too much work. I'm not going to do anything to the poem to provide substance for my audience. I'm not going to try to teach people. Instead, I would rather be the Jerry Springer show and go on there and cause controversy and debate. And I'm going to throw lies to you. I'm going to twist things. I'm going to tell you that the United States government said the chest was in Yellowstone. I'm going to do whatever I can to do that. I'm going to play nice video and show some trickling water. Maybe I'll even pose nude on the national park. And believe me, you don't want to see that, but maybe I'll do that, right? Because anything that'll get people to the channel, look at this. This is craziness, man. It's sad that Forrest Fenn had to die without being able to witness all this nonsense. He didn't even get to live to see us find out the name Jack. He didn't see any of that. All of a sudden he dies, and all this shit, all this controversy comes out. All hell breaks loose. People are telling lies and trying to pull wool over the eyes of the naive. I mean, silliness, man. Peace.